Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk here for your Games for Change. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be here. My name is Christopher Leech. My pronouns are he, him. Here's a little bit on some of the work I'm doing. A lot of really big and sort of sciencey words here that I'll be going through for you in just a moment. But first, a little bit about myself. This is mostly for anyone who just wants to sort of screen grab the video in post. But the main thing that you want to get from this is that I am a PhD researcher looking at psychology, looking at video games and student mental health. I'm currently in my second year. I'm also a bit of a content creator. I'm a person with albinism and I'm legally blind. The rest we will sort of, don't worry about that too much. Let's talk a little bit about rhetoric, receptivity, empathy, and mental health then. And what do all these terms mean? If we look at rhetoric first, then there's sort of essentially two core components in a way a game is made, right? Story being the narrative rhetoric, and gameplay, which is the procedural rhetoric. These are all the sort of the sciencey terms, right? Receptivity, then we sort of think, well, what makes a game receptive? What's going to keep a player playing a game? What makes them involved? Am I going to get the same thing from a game if I'm skipping through all the cutscenes and sort of speed running through it, as you might do if you're looking at every piece of lore and really sort of looking under the hood? Empathy is a really sort of big philosophical term. So I'm sort of being a little bit reductive, but the way I'm applying it here is simply, can we think about and perceive what someone else is feeling? Are we able to understand how this might make them feel? And then does that maybe change what we would do? They break it down that way. And then ill mental health itself, mental health is sort of our state of mind all the time. Ill mental health is when this is sort of maybe not optimal, not going through a thing. I should stress at this point, this is not a clinical trial, it's not an intervention, it's not an attempt to say that games in and of themselves are therapy. Therapy should always be done with a therapist. I think that's really important to sort of clarify here. But these are the four sort of components that I'm sort of mixing together and trying to measure in a very scientific way. Now, digital games with a purpose, then, what are they? It's essentially sort of digital games are science for video games in its purest form. But this is about more than just being a game for entertainment. It's focused specifically on social issues and increasing knowledge. And in my case, I'm looking specifically at mental health. So games like Celeste, Hellblade, Please Knock on My Door, Depression Quest, all were made specifically to try and make this point and provide this perspective and knowledge. And that's really important. It's about not just being entertaining. Games like Bioshock or Final Fantasy VII, they talk about things that impact mental health, of course they do, but they're not specifically designed for that purpose, if that makes sense. So how did I end up here? Well, that's an excellent question. I've kind of blown through the very sort of nexus of what I'm doing in just a couple of minutes, but bear with me. My undergraduate dissertation in psychology, you can see pictured here, was looking at video games and deviancy. And then my master's dissertation in health psychology was on disability and discriminations. Now, back in the day, 2016, mental health wasn't interwoven into, in my case, UK legislation as it is now. I had experienced ill mental health myself through bereavement. And as such, I kind of went through the university systems and the sort of national mental health systems and realized that students, unfortunately, are quite a vulnerable population when it comes to ill mental health. And then I thought, you know what? I'm goodish at science. I love video games. Let's kind of put it together and go boom, PhD idea, because there's not a lot of work that has looked at this type of thing, which is why I'm helping to do it. Let's talk about do's and don'ts with good science. Let's don't start with the don'ts. Hot sauce is not a good measure of, say, aggression. How much hot sauce you'd put on someone else's food. This is a real thing. I'm not joking. No, seriously, don't laugh. I'm not joking. Referencing your own work happens a lot. It becomes very self-circular in that sense. Reusing your own data and pretending you don't also does happen. It's a little bit questionable. Buying into moral panics. Did you know that back in the ancient Greek times, they were actually worried about writing because they thought everyone wouldn't use their memory to remember things, and therefore that would be bad. Imagine not being able to write anything down nowadays. And telling people what they want to hear. If someone asks you to do a piece of research, obviously they might have specific things they're hoping to find. It's important to actually lead with what you found, not manipulate that in any way to what the people paying you wanted you to find. The good, then. Let's talk about this. These are the things we want. These are the things I'm aspiring to do and are trying to do in my work. Pre-registration. That means I detail a big document before I even start doing anything about what I'm going to do in my study, how I'm going to do it, why, and I explain it all in crystal clear detail. Referencing balanced attitudes. There is going to be research on video games and aggression, all these sorts of things, addiction, and I have to be balanced with those. I have to present those arguments. I can be critical, but present those along with other arguments linking to benefits of, say, video game use and well-being. Open science and releasing data. So I actually will release my data. You at home will eventually be able to analyze it the same way I did. And if you find something different, shoot me an email. Presenting information without making bold claims. There's this kind of publish or perish kind of perspective, and do whatever it takes to get that paper published. Don't overstate your claims. If you find what you find, that's the main thing. Is being honest. And you have to kind of these two sort of link together, but really in video game research, you have to understand the impact video games have in people's lives. I don't need to tell you here that today. But I also want to make sure that people can understand what I'm saying. If nearly half the population play video games, which they do, but only 10% can understand the academic jargon smargon that I've written my paper up that no one can access because they can't afford it, what's the point? So a big part of what I do, and I mentioned sort of content creation before, with my podcast and streams and stuff, is being able to break this down. We call it scientific communication, to give it its fancy name, but that's the really key thing of making sure everyone can follow that properly. Now, the key things I want you to be able to take away from this is that science is for everyone. Everyone should be able to be involved. They should be able to understand and be engaged. It's a bit of a leap of faith, but I'd love to see a greater collaboration between industry and researchers. We in psychology, we have a bit of a bad rep. That's kind of on us. People like me are trying to change that, and we want to work with you to create better games and have a greater impact on players. Everyone here has a passion for games and a love for games, and we want to be able to use games to build a better future. The hope for my research, the dream, is to imagine a way in which that we can combine video games and that type of experience with perhaps being an undergraduate and getting involved and playing through an experience and knowing exactly where the mental health resources are on campus, where you can go online, and just reducing some of that stigmatization. Talking about it is one of the big issues. Thank you everyone for listening. If you've got any questions, get in touch. Drop me an email, drop me a line. I hope you've enjoyed this. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to be at Games for Change. I can't express that enough. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much.